Hello, I'm Katie Steele, Southwest Climate Hub Coordinator and Director of the ARID Project at New Mexico State University.
And I'm Tanya Burnett. I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist at the University of Nebraska of Lincoln at the National Drought Mitigation Center.
And I'm Julie Elliott, here today to walk you through the current GrassCast maps for the Southern Great Plains. I recently retired from the Natural Resources Conservation Service as a rangeland management specialist.
There's a whole bunch of collaborators that make GrassCast possible, and the slide you can see is a quick tour of their logos.
We're going to discuss the GrassCast forecast for the Southern Plains. Just a reminder, GrassCast is a tool that gives you forage forecast for the growing season. And when you go to the tool, you'll see 3 maps. Each map considers a different weather pattern for the growing season. Julie will be explaining how to best pick which map works for you. But first, Katie will give a quick overview of the long lead weather forecast for the Southern Plains.
Thanks, Tanya. To interpret the GrassCast forecasts for any given date, you will need to have a handle on how much more precipitation will fall for the remainder of the growing season at your location, as well as what temperatures are going to do, because together that's what's driving evapotranspiration and ultimately the amount of water that's available for the growing grasses. So we're going to take a look at the National Weather Service outlooks, but you can consult any seasonal forecasts that you trust. So on the screen now, we're looking at the seasonal precipitation outlook for August, September, and October 2023. And if we look at the Southern Plains area, most of this is falling in the equal chances zone. So basically, we have very little clue as to whether or not you're going to receive more or less than the average precipitation expected at your location. Now, if we look at the temperature, we've got above average temperatures going on for the most part in the Southern Plains region, between 33 to 60% above average temperatures expected for the next 3 months, August, September, and October. So don't really know what's going to happen with the rain, but we do know temperatures are going to be higher. You'll need to consider really what that's going to do to the available forage that might be growing at your location. So over to you, Julie.
Thanks, Katie. For more detailed information about GrassCast and how it works, please see the June 16th video on this YouTube channel. Before we dive in, those of you in eastern New Mexico will want to consider what type of growing season you have. Do you have a continuous growing season from spring until fall, or do you have 2 distinct growing seasons, a spring and a summer, with virtually no overlap between the spring grasses and the summer grasses? If your growing season is continuous, this is your video. If you have 2 distinct growing seasons, then you'll want to find the Southwest video on this YouTube channel.
Julie, I'm wondering, how have the summer growing season conditions been so far for the Southern Plains?
Well, if we look at the water year, Tanya, which is October 1st to the current date, it's really a mixed bag. Here I'm showing the last 3 maps that were made, so June 26th, July 11th, and then through July 24th. You can see that Southeast New Mexico and most of Texas have not kept up the abundance of rain indicated by the larger and larger areas of orange going across these 3 maps, indicating that there's 5 to 25% less precipitation than the 1980 to 2022 average. But the orange areas in Oklahoma, Colorado, and Kansas have all retreated since the first part of June, especially in Oklahoma and south central Kansas, indicating that those areas are picking up more moisture. Not surprisingly then, if we look at the summer rainfall only, so April 1st through June 26th, April 1st to July 11th, and the most recent precipitation map, April 1st through July 24th, we can see that there's been a lot of summer rainfall, as indicated by all the green in most of the 3 states, indicating 5 to 25% more precipitation with this kind of yellow-green color, up to 100% or more precipitation than the long-term average indicated by these dark green areas. It is worth noting, though, that these dark green areas are getting smaller, especially in Texas and New Mexico, which is reflected in those water year maps we just looked at. The deficit in Southeast New Mexico is even more severe than the water year maps.
Thank you so much for those explanations, Julie. I could see someone wondering why there's two sets of maps, the water year maps and the growing season maps. And why do they look so different?
I thought the same thing, Tanya. So I set the two sets of maps together to help us understand what is happening. So the top maps indicate total precipitation received since April 1st as a percent of the 1980 to 2022 average. These bottom maps represent the total precipitation received since October 1st as a percent of the 1980 to 2022 average. There's less of these darker green colors in the bottom set of maps because October 1st to April 1st time period was pretty dry for most of the area compared to the long-term average. The rains since April 1st have been so much more than that average that they've made up for that fall, winter, and early spring shortfalls, except for areas like Southeast New Mexico and the western part of the GrassCast area in Texas. Even Kansas, which has been hit hard for a couple years now with drought, is gaining ground, but that deficit is just so much more than the excess that total is still showing short in that long-term or even in the short-term window of looking at precipitation.
Julie, I'm anticipating that GrassCast is going to still have a lot of blue in it, indicating a lot of forage production because of the large amount of moisture much of the area has seen so far, but also because we're getting late in the growing season. Would that be correct?
You are absolutely right, Katie. With the very notable exception of Southeast New Mexico and the very western edge of the Great Plains in Northeast New Mexico, and the very southern and southeast part of Texas, and then, of course, parts of Kansas, and a few more isolated spots here and there, most of the southern plains looks pretty good. If you're sitting in one of those orange or red areas, there's nothing minor about what's happening outside of your window. This is particularly true in the left map, which is the forecast if the spigot were to suddenly get turned back on.
Julie, could we by chance look at each map one at a time as we have been doing?
Oh, you bet. Like 2 weeks ago, I feel badly for Southeast Mexico because I keep having to say, except for, but here it is, except for Eddy County and the neighboring areas to the west and north, and then Andrews County in Texas, most of the southern Great Plains have no worries. The precipitation is above the 1980 to 2022 average for the rest of the growing season. For those of you in the yellow and orange areas, this is the best the GrassCast model thinks it can be. I'm really hoping that you're well into implementing your drought plan, or maybe you never stopped implementing it since early this year. I do want to caution our audience in Kansas. It's getting pretty late in the growing season, and you suffered severe losses last year. If your rangeland was in good condition with an exceptionally deep and healthy root system, you might luck out with something near average production if rainfall continues or starts to be in abundance. But that's a mighty big if and terribly risky to count on.
So I expect that near average precipitation, if that's what we're going to get for the rest of the season, is going to expand those areas expecting losses.
Yes, it does, Katie. Almost all of Southeast New Mexico is now forecasted to see at least a 15 to 30% loss of production compared to the long-term average, as well as these Texas counties along the southern border of the GrassCast area. We also see expansion of more or less minor losses along the western border of the Great Plains in Northeast New Mexico, which this is a new development since 2 weeks ago. There's a few areas along the Oklahoma border in Texas and then north central Kansas that fall into that loss category as indicated by the orange color. GrassCast expects a lot of country to see at least 5 to 15% more production than average, as indicated by this light blue color. and significant areas of 30% or more production than average, as indicated by this really dark blue color.
Julie, I'm anticipating that Southeast New Mexico, Southern Texas, and even Kansas will see significant areas of forecasted losses if the rains shut off or stay shut off for the rest of the growing season.
No doubt, Tanya. Of course, less rain means less production, and the areas that have been in deficit precipitation so far will not improve with continued deficit precipitation. The areas forecasted to have above average production get smaller and smaller, and those with below average production continue to grow. Notably, even if the spigot shuts off, GrassCast expects most of the panhandle of Texas, the northeast corners in New Mexico, and almost all of Oklahoma, Colorado, and the western part of Kansas to still see significantly above average production. Now, just a word of caution. This is above average total production, and it might be due to the excessive growth of spring grasses. These grasses will become about as tasty as straw to livestock with hot and dry weather. Cheatgrass could also make up a significant proportion of this above average production. We are definitely far enough into the growing season that the stage has pretty much been set for summer grasses. This is because the grasses have now shifted attention to making seed heads and setting root storage for the winter and next year's growth. For the most part, any leaf growth that occurs now will be very minor and only what's needed to support the plant. What could happen, and that GrassCast cannot reflect, is that with dry, hot weather, the grasses could dry down early and even become brittle and start breaking off. If this happens, the grass on offer for grazing will start falling back.
Thanks so much, Julie. Just a quick reminder, GrassCast is forecasting total production, not grazable production. When a loss is expected, the grazable production loss will be significantly more than the total production loss. When an excess is expected, one needs to consider if that excess will be made up of grass species that are tasty to animals and when they might be tasty to them.
Thanks, Tanya. And you can go to grasscast.unl.edu or just type GrassCast into your favorite search engine to find the website. On the website, you can access a zoomable feature that will let you see more specific information about your area, including how much loss or gain you might expect, how much precipitation GrassCast believes you have received to date, and how much might be expected for each of the 3 scenarios. And there are also several videos and tutorials that can help you interpret the map. So once again, thanks, Julie, and thanks, Tanya, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.